Hello and good day. For today, let's continue the discussion in partnership liquidation. Dawn Partnership is undergoing liquidation. Information on Dawn is as follows. Cash, 20,000 pesos. Accounts receivable, 60,000 pesos. Receivable from A, 10,000 pesos. Inventory, 120,000 pesos. And equipment, net of accumulated depreciation, 290,000 pesos. For total assets of 500,000 pesos. Accounts payable, 30,000 pesos. Payable to B, 20,000 pesos. A capital, 60%, 250,000 pesos. And B capital, 40%, 200,000 pesos. For total liabilities and equity of 500,000 pesos. Case 4, marshaling of assets. All the non-cash assets except the receivable from A were realized for 65,000 pesos. The personal assets and liabilities of the partners are as follows. Personal assets of A, 200,000 pesos. Personal liabilities of A, 440,000 pesos. Personal assets of B, 380,000 pesos. And personal liabilities of B, 240,000 pesos. Requirement, compute for the cash distributions to the partners. Case 4 is all about marshaling of assets. The rule of marshaling of assets is applied in case of partnership insolvency and some of the partners are insolvent. Paano ba malalaman kung yung partner ay insolvent? The partner is said to be insolvent if his personal liabilities are greater than his personal assets. Mas malaki yung kanyang personal liabilities kaysa sa kanyang personal assets. Kapag may capital deficiency, yung insolvent partner, yung kanyang capital deficiency ay i-absorb ng solvent partners. That means the capital deficiency of the insolvent partner is allocated to the solvent partners. In case 4, marshaling of assets, we need to compute first the loss on sale. The non-cash assets are sold for 65,000 pesos. So yung proceeds ay 65,000 pesos. Ngayon, yung proceeds na 65,000 pesos, i-compare natin yan sa carrying amount ng lahat ng non-cash assets para ma-determine natin kung meron bang gain or loss. The carrying amount of all non-cash assets except receivable from A is 470,000 pesos. Since mas malaki yung carrying amount kaysa sa proceeds, merong loss na 405,000 pesos. Alamin naman natin kung sino ang insolvent between A and B. Ang personal assets ni A ay 200,000 pesos at ang kanyang personal liabilities ay 440,000 pesos. Ang personal assets ni B ay 380,000 pesos at ang kanyang personal liabilities ay 240,000 pesos. Insolvent ang partner kung mas malaki ang kanyang personal liabilities kaysa sa kanyang personal assets. Since mas malaki yung personal liabilities ni A kaysa sa kanyang personal assets, therefore si A ay insolvent. Si B naman ay solvent partner since his personal assets are greater than his personal liabilities. I-compute natin yung amount received by partners. Ang capital balance ni A ay 250,000 pesos at ang capital balance ni B ay 200,000 pesos for a total of 450,000 pesos. Yung receivable from A na 10,000 pesos, that is deducted from the capital of A. At yung payable to B na 20,000 pesos, that is added to the capital of B. 20,000 pesos minus 10,000 pesos, that is equal to 10,000 pesos. Yung capital ni A after ma-deduct yung receivable from A na 10,000 pesos ay 240,000 pesos. Yung capital ni B after ma-add yung 20,000 pesos ay 220,000 pesos. 240,000 pesos plus 220,000 pesos, that is equal to 460,000 pesos. Of course, you can also compute for the 460,000 pesos by adding 10,000 pesos to 450,000 pesos. Next, allocation of loss. Yung loss na na-compute natin kanina ay 405,000 pesos. I-allocate natin yung negative 405,000 pesos based on the profit or loss ratio of the partners. For A, negative 405,000 pesos times 60%, that is equal to negative 243,000 pesos. For B, negative 405,000 pesos times 40%, that is equal to negative 162,000 pesos. The capital of A after allocating the loss is negative 3,000 pesos. And the capital of B after allocating the loss is 58,000 pesos for a total of 55,000 pesos. 58,000 pesos minus 3,000 pesos, that is equal to 55,000 pesos. As you can see, merong capital deficiency si partner A at si partner A ay insolvent. So yung capital deficiency na 3,000 pesos, that is absorbed by partner B. Meaning to say, i-deduct natin yung 3,000 pesos sa capital ni B. So, no amount will be received by partner A. That means there is no cash distribution to partner A. The amount received by partner B is 55,000 pesos. That means 55,000 pesos is the cash contribution or cash distribution to partner B. All in all, the total amount received by partners is 55,000 pesos. I-check nga natin kung tama yung 55,000 pesos. Cash on hand na 20,000 pesos plus yung proceeds from sale na 65,000 pesos, that is equal to 85,000 pesos. Then, we will deduct the accounts payable na 30,000 pesos. 85,000 pesos minus 30,000 pesos, that is equal to 55,000 pesos. So, the amount received by partners na 55,000 pesos ay tama. Next, Case 5, Reconstruction of Information. After all the assets, excluding the receivable from A, were realized and the liabilities to outside creditors were settled, B received 140,000 pesos in the cash distribution to the partners. Requirement, compute for the following: A, loss on sale; B, share of A in the cash distribution to the partners; C, cash available for distribution to the partners; and D, net proceeds from sale of the non-cash assets, excluding the receivable from A. Case 5 is all about reconstruction of information. In reconstruction of information, some of the information are available. And using the available information, we will work back in order for us to compute the requirements. Step 1 is prepare pro forma distribution table. Ilalagay natin sa distribution table yung mga available na information. Ang capital balance ni A ay 250,000 pesos at yung capital balance ni B ay 200,000 pesos for a total of 450,000 pesos. Yung receivable from A na 10,000 pesos, that is deducted from the capital of A. And yung payable to B na 20,000 pesos, that is added to the capital of B. 20,000 pesos minus 10,000 pesos, that is equal to 10,000 pesos. The capital balance of A after deducting the receivable from A is 240,000 pesos. And the capital of B after adding the payable to B is 220,000 pesos for a total of 460,000 pesos. Sinabi dito sa case na ang na-receive ni partner B in the cash distribution to the partners ay 140,000 pesos. Yung mga question marks, yan yung hahanapin natin. Yan yung i-compute natin. The next step is squeeze the amounts using the available information. Ang una nating i-compute is yung amount of loss allocated to partner B. Since given na yung 220,000 pesos at 140,000 pesos. 140,000 pesos minus 220,000 pesos, that is equal to negative 80,000 pesos allocation of loss to B. Since na-compute na natin yung negative 80,000 pesos, at this point, we can now answer requirement A. 80,000 pesos allocation of loss to B divided by 40%, that is equal to negative 200,000 loss. And that is the answer in requirement letter A. Next to compute is the amount of loss allocated to partner A. Negative 200,000 loss times 60%, that is equal to negative 120,000 loss, allocation of loss to A. Of course, there's another way to compute the 120,000 pesos or the negative 120,000 pesos. Negative 200,000 pesos minus negative 80,000 pesos, that is equal to negative 120,000 pesos. At this point, pwede na nating makompute yung amount received by partner A. 240,000 pesos minus 120,000 pesos, that is equal to 120,000 pesos cash distribution to A. And that is the answer in requirement letter B. Pwede na rin natin makompute yung requirement letter C, cash available for distribution to partners. 120,000 pesos plus 140,000 pesos, that is equal to 260,000 pesos. Another way to compute for the 260,000 pesos is 460,000 pesos minus 200,000 pesos. Next, let's answer requirement letter D. Net proceeds from sale of the non-cash assets, excluding the receivable from A. Yung loss on sale na na-compute natin kanina ay negative 200,000 pesos. At ang carrying amount ng lahat ng non-cash assets, except receivable from A, ay 470,000 pesos. So, by working back, the net proceeds from sale of the non-cash assets, excluding the receivable from A, is 270,000 pesos. And that is the answer in requirement letter D. Next, case 6, non-cash asset used as payment for claim. All the assets, excluding the receivable from A, were realized except for equipment with carrying amount of 60,000 pesos, which will take at an equity set of price of 20,000 pesos. The remaining cash of 35,000 pesos is to be divided among the partners in a manner that will avoid the possible recovery of cash from a partner. Requirement: how much is the total payment to be in cash and in kind? Dito sa case 6, ang i-compute natin ay yung total payment to be in cash and in kind. Ang capital balance ni A ay 250,000 pesos at ang capital balance ni B ay 200,000 pesos for a total of 450,000 pesos. Yung receivable from A na 10,000 pesos, that is deducted from the capital of A. And yung payable to B na 20,000 pesos, that is added to the capital of B. 20,000 pesos minus 10,000 pesos, that is equal to 10,000 pesos. 250,000 pesos minus 10,000 pesos, that is equal to 240,000 pesos. 200,000 pesos plus 20,000 pesos, that is equal to 220,000 pesos, for a total of 460,000 pesos. At this point, kailangan nating i-compute yung total loss na i-allocate natin sa mga partners. Ang remaining cash ay 35,000 pesos. At ang settlement price ng equipment ay 20,000 pesos. So, ang total assets ay 55,000 pesos. Ang equity ay 460,000 pesos. Of course, included dyan yung receivable from A na 10,000 pesos at yung payable to B na 20,000 pesos. As you can see, hindi balanse ang accounting equation. Therefore, yung difference, yan yung magiging total loss. 55,000 pesos minus 460,000 pesos, that is equal to negative 405,000 pesos. At yung negative 405,000 pesos, yan yung i-allocate natin na loss sa mga partners. For partner A, negative 405,000 pesos times 60%. That is equal to negative 243,000 pesos. For partner B, 405,000 pesos or negative 405,000 pesos times 40%. That is equal to negative 162,000 pesos. The capital balance of A after allocating the loss is negative 3,000 pesos. And the capital balance of B is 58,000 pesos. That is the capital balance of B after allocating the loss, for a total of 55,000 pesos. 58,000 pesos minus 3,000 pesos, that is equal to 55,000 pesos. Next, deduct the payment in equipment of 20,000 pesos from the capital of B. 58,000 pesos minus 20,000 pesos, that is equal to 38,000 pesos. As you can see, my capital deficiency is partner A. Yung capital deficiency na 3,000 pesos, yan ay i-absorb ni partner B. So yung 3,000 pesos, yan ay i-deduct sa capital ni partner B. After allocating the deficiency, no payment in cash will be given to partner A. And 35,000 pesos will be paid in cash to partner B. At this point, we can now answer the requirement in case 6. The payment in equipment is 20,000 pesos and the payment in cash is 35,000 pesos. Therefore, the total payment to be in equipment and in cash is 55,000 pesos. Next, Case 7, Cash Priority Program. Done will be liquidated on installment basis. In the first month of the liquidation process, the non-cash assets were realized as follows. A. Half of the accounts receivable was collected. B. 75% of the inventory was sold at 80% of cost. C. Equipment with carrying amount of 200,000 pesos was sold for 185,000 pesos. And D. 12,000 pesos liquidation expenses were paid. Additional 5,000 pesos liquidation expenses are expected to be incurred in subsequent periods. Requirement: compute for the cash distributions to the partners using a cash priority program. Case 7 is all about cash priority program. Cash priority program is prepared in order to avoid overpayments of cash to the partners. By preparing this cash priority program, malalaman natin yung partner na unang mababayaran at yung partner na mahuhuling mababayaran. Let's first compute the maximum loss absorption capacity or MLAC. MLAC is equal to total partners' interest in the partnership divided by partners' profit or loss percentage or partners' profit or loss ratio. Ano ba yung purpose ng MLAC or Maximum Loss Absorption Capacity? Ang purpose ng MLAC or Maximum Loss Absorption Capacity ay para malaman natin yung partner na unang mababayaran at yung partner na mahuhuling mababayaran. In preparing the cash priority program, the partner with the highest maximum loss absorption capacity shall be paid first, while the partner with the lowest maximum loss absorption capacity shall be paid last. Therefore, yung partner na may pinaka-mataas na MLAC or Maximum Loss Absorption Capacity, siya ang unang mababayaran. Ang capital balance ni A ay 250,000 pesos at ang capital balance ni B ay 200,000 pesos. Yung receivable from A na 10,000 pesos, that is deducted from the capital of A. At yung payable to B na 20,000 pesos, that will be added to the capital of B. 250,000 pesos minus 10,000 pesos, that is equal to 240,000 pesos. 200,000 pesos plus 20,000 pesos, that is equal to 220,000 pesos. Next, i-divide natin yung profit or loss ratio. For A, 240,000 pesos divided by 60%, that is equal to MLAC of 400,000 pesos. For B, 220,000 pesos divided by 40%, that is equal to MLAC of 550,000 pesos. As you can see, since mas mataas yung MLAC ni B, siya ang unang mababayaran. Next, i-equalize natin yung MLAC ni partner A at MLAC ni partner B. We need to equalize the MLAC of partner A and the MLAC of partner B because this will be the basis in preparing the cash priority program. Ang MLAC ni A ay 400,000 pesos at ang MLAC ni B ay 550,000 pesos. As you can see, merong difference na 150,000 pesos. At yung difference na 150,000 pesos, yan ay i-deduct sa MLAC ni partner B. After getting the difference, we can now compute the first cash priority. To compute for the first cash priority, we will multiply the difference of 150,000 pesos by the profit or loss ratio of partner B. So that is 150,000 pesos times 40%. That is equal to 60,000 pesos. Next, let's compute the cash available to the partners. Cash, 20,000 pesos plus collection from accounts receivable, 30,000 pesos. That is 60,000 pesos times 1/2 or 60,000 pesos times 50%. Plus, sale of inventory, 72,000 pesos. That is 120,000 pesos times 75% times 80%. Plus, sale of equipment, 185,000 pesos minus liquidation expenses, 12,000 pesos minus estimated future liquidation expenses, 5,000 pesos, minus payment for accounts payable, 30,000 pesos. That is equal to cash available to partners, 260,000 pesos. At this point, we can now compute for the cash distributions to the partners. The cash available to the partners is 260,000 pesos. Partner B is paid 60,000 pesos first. After paying 60,000 pesos to partner B, the remaining cash is 200,000 pesos. These 200,000 pesos will be allocated to both partners based on their profit or loss ratio. For A, 200,000 pesos times 60%. That is equal to 120,000 pesos. And for partner B, 200,000 pesos times 60%, that is equal to 80,000 pesos. So the cash distribution to partner A is 120,000 pesos and the cash distribution to partner B is 140,000 pesos.